Howdy folks, welcome back to Kdog's Weekend Movies. So today we're going to, I should say just this weekend, well, we're going to take a look at some more movies, particularly some I haven't really talked about, and maybe some potentially classics. I just like, you know, like I know people do a lot of the first time reaction videos, but I'm not quite sure on how to do that. I really kind of want to do that where I could watch the movie and you watch it with me, but obviously copyright and YouTube is really not friendly with that sort of thing. So, and I do kind of want to be nice and, you know, kind of play by the rules a little bit. So, and because I don't own the rights to the movies. I own a DVD copy, but I don't own the rights. I don't own the content to that movie. But instead, I do these little things and where I just talk about them and tell you, hey, go check these movies out, and so on and so forth. So tonight the first feature is going to be a Western from 1957. And this is a classic Western. I've seen this film many times. It's one of my favorite Westerns. The story has been adapted several times, but we're going to take a look at the certain adaptation of the same story. It is from Paramount Pictures, Gunfight at the OK Corral. Yeah, with Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas. So again, this is one of my favorite all-time Westerns. So grab your popcorn. Matter of fact, this is not to plug AMC theaters, but this is the microwavable AMC theaters popcorn. It is quite good. Do check your local Walmart. That's where I know it to be sold, and or your local AMC theater. Chances are it's going to be cheaper at Walmart, so just keep that in mind. So grab a big old bowl of this. Grab your remotes. I'm not quite sure what streaming platform this is on, so check Paramount Plus because it is a Paramount release. Check Max. Just kind of poke around. Just maybe Google it to see where it's available, or Amazon Prime. But do check this movie out. We're going to take a look at it tonight. So here from 1957, directed by John Sturges. It is Gunfight at the OK Corral. So the Gunfight at OK Corral, released in 1957. This is one of my favorite all-time Westerns, and it's been referenced I don't know how many times, this particular telling of the story. Now, this same story has been adapted several times by many different actors, directors, and studios. Just to name a few. Not only was there Gunfight at the OK Corral, but there was, prior to this, John Ford and 20th Century Fox made My Darling Clementine. Then there was, in the 90s, we had both movies called Tombstone and Wyatt Earp. Same story, just told a little bit differently. But and also in the 70s there was one called Doc, and it had I'm trying to think who played. Stacy Keach played Doc Holliday in that, and that was in late 70s, early 80s. But this one is Gunfight at the OK Corral. It came out in 1957. This was pretty much the vehicle of Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas, as Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, to set things right in the city of Tombstone against the Ike Clanton and Johnny Ringo and that whole clan. Now, the film, as there were so many people in this film that were then unknowns. Like, for example, Lee Van Cleef is in this, the guy from the Good and the Bad and the Ugly movies. He's in this film playing, let's see, who does he play? He plays Ed Bailey, who is one of the first people who Doc Holliday has a beef with, or some who has a beef with Doc Holliday, and so very early film for him. Also, Dennis Hopper plays the youngest Clanton member, as well as several other people. DeForest Kelley plays Morgan Earp. Earl Holliman, he would go on to be in a few John Wayne movies, and as well as this was also produced by Hal Wallace. So Hal Wallace, just Google his name and look at some of the films that he produced or was behind. Even the location where this movie was shot, you have it was shot at old Tucson Studios, which to this day is still being used. The last thing I know that it was used for as a western town was in a music video, actually, for country music singer Randy Houser song called Like a Cowboy. So that same studio that was location for that was used for a gunfight at the OK Corral. It was used for Rio Bravo, just several westerns and films. So it's just this is a film that it kind of gets, I want to say, forgotten about amongst culture, but it was a staple among American westerns. And this film, like I said, the story has been told several times, and I think when you look at the story, people want to look at, like mostly today, they want to look at Tombstone. However, Tombstone is really not the best adaptation of the story. Even though Val Kilmer is excellent as Wyatt Earp. I think we all unanimously agree on that, but that movie was such a mess that that it's one of the most it's pretty notorious about how terrible of a production that movie was. Now, Gunfight at the OK Corral, I didn't see anything that was saying that it was a troubled shoot or anything like that, but the only thing I saw was that Burt Lancaster made this movie so that he could be in another movie that Hal Wallace was producing at the time. So he kind of did it as a favor to him. So it's a good western. I mean, it's not it's not the film. It's not a film that. It's a film that I would say is a landmark among the American western. But then again, so are the other adaptations of the same story. it's not a, what I'm trying to get at, it's not a film that says, well, John Wayne needed to be in this picture. No, it doesn't need that. It just needed some good actors who could hold their weight. And because this was a good action-packed story, or a good action-packed film and telling of the story. Now, the only thing is, I think even for, if you would tell like the Wyatt Earp film, or Tombstone story, or even this film in particular, you could not do this way today, definitely, because the depiction of Doc Holliday, because if definitely this film will be put under a microscope, and Doc Holliday would be labeled a misogynist, and just and he really is a horrible person, even though he is a hero in the film, but he definitely would be labeled misogynistic, because of the way he treats his mistress, Kate Fisher. He loves to kind of, I don't want to say strangle her, but hold her very roughly and kind of throw her around a little bit. Now, but like I said, the other adaptations, this is a rough story to tell. It's a violent story, but it actually did happen. It was based on a true story. But according to what I read, the actual gunfight lasted only 30 seconds. The gunfight was over within 30 seconds. And only 3 people were killed. This depicts, justice being served by wiping out the entire Ike clan along with Johnny Ringo. So, yeah, it's definitely a violent story. It's definitely a story that I don't think Hollywood would adapt today. And Westerns in particular these days have a very tough time. Unfortunately, we just saw that happen recently with Kevin Costner's film Horizon, an American Saga. Now, what I've read is that supposedly Netflix has picked it up and will do the rest of the installments. But the plan was for Kevin Costner was to make that a theatrical motion picture, and he had been working on this film for probably about 30 years. It's a project he's always wanted to make. Now, that being said, the Western in this day and age struggles on the big screen. The last successful Western to hit the big screen was 2010's True Grit. The one that starred Jeff Bridges and was directed by the Coen brothers and executive produced by Steven Spielberg. Now, there is a tie in here with Gunfight at the OK Corral. Hal Wallace. Hal Wallace was the original producer of True Grit. Also a successful Western picture. Now, but see, that's how much the movies have changed. It's tough to put a Western on the big screen. I'm just kind of reiterating this, but the Western sadly does not have a place on the big screen anymore. It is still alive. It is still flourishing. But, and this is where I would say to Kevin Costner, and this is what happened to him. I'm even wearing a Yellowstone t-shirt. Is that the Western now belongs, especially when you're going to do long form like that, it needs to go onto television or a streaming service. So, and the reason why I say that is because think about all the possibilities that you could do with a TV show as opposed to a theatrical motion picture. Now, in terms of scope and scale, do those projects belong on the big screen? Absolutely. But in terms of the storytelling form, it has to be long form now, and it can't be short. And so the place where that belongs is on television, streaming. Because think of the possibilities where you could go with that. You're basically limitless. And so that's where the Western has gone. As back in the days of Gunfight at the OK Corral, these were the blockbusters. The Western and the biblical epics back in the 1950s were the blockbuster movies. They were the Marvel movies of the time. I mean, just go back and look at, just go back and look at the film slates of the 1950s and early 60s. It was biblical epics and westerns. I mean, and it was and with the invent in television, what was the big hit shows back in the 1950s? Westerns. So westerns were very, very popular genre. I mean, think about shows like Bonanza, The Big Valley, Gunsmoke, and see, again, westerns are a good long-form storytelling project that you need to do more of a television series with rather than theatrical motion pictures. Now, don't get me wrong. Theatrical motion pictures of a Western are great. John Wayne did it for years. Gunfight at the OK Corral was successful. The Magnificent Seven was successful. But think of the possibilities that you can do with long-form storytelling. I mean, a show like Yellowstone actually is a modern Western. It is a Western, but it's set in modern times. And you think about how long that story can go and keep our interest. Another one was a show called Justified. Okay, so the character of Raylan Givens, played by Timothy Oliphant, yes, he's a deputy U.S. Marshal, wears a cowboy hat, but he's in modern times, and so he handles things by his badge and his gun. So, and he's a no-nonsense deputy U.S. Marshal. So, Gunfight at the OK Corral. It has always been one of my favorite westerns. I don't know why. To establish why. I have no... It's just always stuck with me. I just always thought it was because it's this it's this story about two guys who really don't care for each other. Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp do not like each other at all. Sorry if the lighting changed. My Blu-ray player just turned off, and so. But yeah, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp do not like each other at all. But they realize that, hey, there's some bad guys coming, and you're going to need all the help that you can get. So deputize me, and we're going to take care of business. And this film in particular also goes into, they don't really say what Doc Holliday's illness was, but I think in later films they have established that it was tuberculosis. But in this film they just have Kirk Douglas cough up a storm, and at one point he passes out very intense. He passes out and lays on the bed like the night before the shootout is to take place, and then he gets up, and they're like, "Doc, don't go out there, you're gonna die." And he's like, "I don't care." So it's definitely an entertaining film. The only problem I have with this movie is that that there is a bit of a romantic relationship between not Doc Holliday, but Wyatt Earp and Rhonda Fleming. And she plays, what was her character name? She played, hold on here, Laura Dembo. And Laura is this, sorry I couldn't remember her name, Miss Denborough. And Wyatt Earp, first time he meets her, he arrests her and puts her in jail because at those times it was definitely a problem when a woman would appear at the gambling tables, because there was usually a fight that broke out and problems were caused. But the film is still a fun film. But now let me get back to this relationship. They establish that there's a relationship there, but then it gets dropped. Wyatt Earp leaves Miss Denborough to go help his brothers in Tombstone, and that's kind of a weak point. Like, okay, my brothers need help, and I have to go meet with them. Well, I'm going to break off this relationship. Why not? I don't know. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Of that, why, people do that all the time. Where because one person moves away or whatever, they they break off relationships with people. But yeah, it's just, I think it was just poorly executed. I would have done it a little bit different, but who knows what happened in the real story. So, gunfight at the OK Corral. check it out. It is available, and while I was watching the movie, I did check it out on streaming services. It is available on Amazon Prime if you would like to check it out. But yeah, do check it out if you love a great Western. Gunfight the OK Corral. So, stay tuned. We've got more coming. Okay, so now we're back with the next feature. And I decided to take a little trip back in time to 1989. And this movie came out in the midst of a very busy year in terms of movies. 1989 was definitely a big year for movies. But a lot of expectations were met, some were not met. So this, fortunately, was one of the met expectations. Was it a gigantic box office hit? Well, pardon the pun. Not necessarily, but it was definitely a crowd pleaser, and it was a pleaser for the Walt Disney Company, because at the time in the 1980s, Walt Disney was really struggling. They were struggling to they had failed to meet expectations of the audience. Not like now where they're pushing DEI and all this woke agenda stuff. I mean, even last week, I went to see Deadpool and Wolverine. Okay, yes, rated R, so it was adult, but it also had the woke DEI agenda in it. But at the same time, it was also poking fun at everything. So that's why I did kind of enjoy Deadpool and Wolverine. But this film was legitimately from the Walt Disney Pictures line of films, and it was a film that was pretty big budgeted for the time, and so Disney took a risk in making this movie, and it was a big special effects movie. Probably, and it's still, I don't know if it's looked at upon today, but at the time it was looked at as one of the big special effects, definitely the biggest special effects movie of the year. What am I talking about? Well, it is 1989's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Yeah, starring Rick Moranis as Wayne Selinsky. Yeah, this was a big movie for its time. So, before any further ado, I would encourage, if you haven't seen this movie or you're my age, showing your kids this for the first time, I think this would be a good one to show them. So, do fire up your Disney Plus. It is available on there. And look up Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Not the sequels, we'll get into that in a moment. But Honey, I Shrunk the Kids from 1989. And let's, pop up a bag of popcorn if you like to. Grab a drink. Let's turn on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids from Walt Disney Pictures in 1989. So that was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids from 1989. Now, that came out in the summer of 1989, and there was like I said, there was a big blockbuster year that year. And for Walt Disney Pictures, this was a big success because, let me see here. I'm trying to look at some of the box office here. Okay, according to IMDb, critical reception for this film was generally positive, and the film was a box office success, grossing $22.2 million in its first week of release. uh, beating Disney's previous record set by Three Men and a Baby 2 years earlier. This benefited from also the success of Batman, and I'll tell you why. And it states here is that because Batman was such a huge number that theaters were packed. Well, if you couldn't go to see Batman, a lot of times you were going to go see. So audiences chose to go see Honey, I Shrunk the Kids while waiting for Batman to open up. So, and they opened the same weekend as Batman. So, if that tells you anything. And what also helped Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was the fact that they were also playing off the success of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was released the previous year in 1988. Because included with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, it's not on this Blu-ray, and I'll get into this. It's not on the Blu-ray release or any of the DVD releases, but the first edition home video releases and Laserdisc contained the Roger Rabbit cartoon Tummy Trouble, which was a I won't say a balls to the wall funny cartoon that's a throwback to Bugs Bunny and Tom and Jerry type of. Just imagine that with Walt Disney Feature Animation doing the animation to it. So this was the debut film of director Joe Johnston. Joe Johnston was a model maker for Industrial Light and Magic. Originally, they had slated for, now get this, the team who was originally behind this movie was known for making a small, very successful independent horror film called Reanimator. So some of the names you may recognize, such as Stuart Gordon, Brian Yuzma, and Ed Naha, who were the people behind that independent horror film Reanimator. They came up with this idea they thought it would be a good Disney comedy, and for whatever reason Stuart Gordon was originally slated to direct this film, but he had to walk away for, I'm not sure why, but he had to walk away from the project, and so they brought on Michael Eisner, and Jeffrey Katzenberg decided to bring on Joe Johnston, who had just completed a short film, but his background was in special visual effects for Industrial Light and Magic. And so with this, they thought, well, hey, this guy obviously does know special effects and visual effects, so let's bring him in as a director and have it be his first feature film. And the original title was called Teeny Weenies. And some of the originally it was not supposed to be Rick Moranis. It was supposed to be, at one point, Chevy Chase. At another point, it was supposed to be John Candy, but they all turned it down. And so, just like what John Candy did with Ghostbusters, opened it up for Rick Moranis to take the part of Wayne Selinsky. And when you know, it's one of Rick Moranis' most iconic roles. Unfortunately, Rick Moranis no longer acts, but it's one of Rick Moranis' most signature roles. And so some of the other people we have here, we have Matt Frewer playing Big Russ Thompson, who's the next door neighbor. Matt Frewer was known at the time for being Max Headroom If you remember Max Headroom back in the day doing Coke commercials, he had his own TV show, which was a precursor. You know, it's kind of what we make, you know, what we know today as AI, but back in the day, it was kind of a Max Headroom was kind of this this figure. He talked in a TV set, and he did all these electronic stutters and different pitches. And Matt Frewer was Max Headroom. So, but in this, he plays Big Russ Thompson. Marcia Strassman was Diane Selinsky as Wayne's wife. Thomas Wilson Brown was Little Russ Thompson. Jared Rushton from Big. Tom Hanks' little buddy, his best friend. He was in this playing Ron. Amy O'Neill. It was Amy Selinsky. Robert Olivery. I hope I'm bad with names. He played Nick Selinsky. Now, he also reprised his role for the sequel, the first sequel. And in a case, now we need to get into this because, and we know the story, as we just saw, is that Wayne Selinsky is this inventor. He's working on something big, and you can tell that in his house that he's an inventor because everything is over the top 80s electronic. Like all the appliances are running on these weird electronics. Like the coffee maker is solar powered, but there's these huge solar panels on top of the coffee maker. The lawnmower is operated by remote control. With big antennas and satellite. And you can tell that. But Wayne Selinsky has invented a shrink machine. And he has a tough time convincing his colleagues at this science center. Now, I had a tough time after watching this all my life that what he was inventing the shrink machine for. Well, it's for the space shuttle, so that they can take as much cargo as they need and use the shrink ray to conserve the space. So, like if you're taking a whole bunch of stuff, you can, or a bunch of cargo, you can shrink it and bring on more. And so, yeah, so that's what he designed the shrink machine for. But instead, nobody at the aeronautics center, wherever he works, there's not one single person that is convinced that it works, and not even he's convinced that it works, because Wayne decides to use the test subjects as fruit, testing it out on fruit. And when he does so, he tests it on an apple, and what happens is the apple explodes. Instead of testing it on a physical, like something that would not fruit, but something else like furniture. He should have tested it on his furniture, is what he should have done, but I digress. This movie definitely is a fun movie. Nothing more, nothing less, but there's a lot of, all he had to do was shrink this thing to test the machine out on this thing instead of a piece of fruit to make sure it works. Kids shouldn't have been out playing baseball, or shouldn't have been hitting the baseball into the attic window, and yeah, or just simply dodge the ray. There's a ton of solutions that they could have done, but the thing is, you wouldn't have a movie if you did all those things. But But that being said, the movie was a big success, and it's, um, so the kids walk into the attic. They get shrunk by the machine, and the dad doesn't. They're so small he can't hear them. He can't see them. He destroys the shrink machine, scooping up the kids with a broom and a dustpan, along with the broken pieces. Puts them in a garbage bag, and sends them out to set with the trash. Well, then the kids, they know where they're at, but they look into the back. They realize they're in the backyard, and they've got a long journey ahead of them to get back to the house to get big again and meet up with their family, because Amy, the sister, she has a date at the mall. This was a typical 80s thing, so she has a date at the mall with a boy. Well, change of plans. And the two neighbor kids, Ron and Russ Thompson, they're supposed to be going camping with their dad. And Nick is just there as the brains of the smartest of all the other kids. And so they start this journey of making their way to the house on the backyard, and it becomes like a jungle, and they also run into the creatures of the backyard, such as insects, the dog. Yeah, they have their own dog. They have the cat, the neighbor's cat, the bees, scorpions, ants. They even run into a puddle of dog pee. And they go, "What's a river doing in your backyard?" It's not a river. It's a big puddle of dog pee. And so, but thus, they also run into things like lawnmowers, giant Legos, giant toys. There's even the remains of a Little Debbie oatmeal cream cookie out in the backyard. The movie at the time was a backyard adventure, and it fit along the lines of something that say Steven Spielberg would produce. It doesn't. It would fit along those lines, but it's not a Spielberg movie whatsoever. Even though Joe Johnston, who directed this film, did work on Raiders of the Lost Ark in terms of special effects. And let me talk about the film's special effects. Now, it was kind of a put together crew. This movie was actually filmed in Mexico to kind of cut costs and things of that nature. So they set up an American neighborhood at this studio. I can't pronounce the name of it. It's Churrasburso. I apologize 100% because I am not good in Spanish, but it was in Mexico City. It was the studio, so they built a American neighborhood that it looks just like any neighborhood in any town, and of course the sets and the stages, they built giant blades of grass, and there's puppetry of with the ants, and there's also some stop motion provided by fellow former ILM stop motion creator Phil Tippett. So he does this sequence with the ant and the scorpion, and then there was another company that did the bee sequence, which used something similar to like what you would see in the movie E.T. So you have the actors in front of a blue screen, and then there's this rig and puppet that's mimicking a bee. And so and for the time, this was a big special effects movie. And it was not produced by ILM or anything like that. I mean, as a matter of fact, ILM could not work on this film because they were too busy working on Ghostbusters 2, and they were working on some other project. I forget. Yeah, there was some other projects going on. So obviously, in the summer of '89, which was a big summer of movies, like I said, you had Ghostbusters 2, you had Batman, you had Star Trek 5, you had all these movies. To say that they're really good, but yeah, you had all those movies coming out, and so it was really time. It was really a matter of time, and of course, when the films came out, it was going to be a battle of the box office, who was going to win. So Batman ended up being the big hit that summer, and Disney wasn't far behind with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So those were the two movies that everybody wanted to see. But the legacy of this film, it's kind of diminished over the years, but at the time, like I said, this came out in '89, but then they followed it up in 1992 with Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. And that's another story in which that's a different story, but it involves in between part 1 and part 2, the Selinskys had another baby, and so by the time you meet the baby, he's 3 years old, and he's a toddler, and so he invents a new ray which will enlarge, and so and so the baby becomes the size of King Kong. But that film was directed by Randall Kleiser, who's worked with Disney in the past with films like Fly the Navigator and several other films. And then there was a direct-to-video sequel that came out in '96, I believe, called Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves, in which the parents get shrunk. And so, and not only that, shortly after that, there was a TV show developed for and it was not network television, but it was syndicated television, in which Peter Scolari took over the role of Wayne Selinsky. And so yeah, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, it does have a special place for me. I remember going to the theater to see this movie back in 1989. It actually was my third movie I ever saw in a movie theater. It was the first live action movie I ever saw in the movie theater. I can tell you, and I can even tell you the theater. It was the North Park Mall Cinemas in Marion, Indiana, which was only a 2-screen theater. Guess what was playing on screen 1? Batman. You guessed it. So, because I remember there was big Batman standees inside the lobby. But we went to go see Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and me and my cousins, we had a ball. And so, yeah, I don't know if the film holds up. It's definitely a product of 80s Disney, in which they were trying out new things. Um, but this is kind of where the legacy is now with this movie. They haven't done anything with it since the TV show in the late 90s. So it's kind of been abandoned. And as a matter of fact, the only way that you could watch this movie on Blu-ray is if you were a member of the Disney Movie Club. That's how I got this. Yeah, that's the only way that you could have ever gotten this movie. I'm thinking at some point they did a limited edition of this to the stores, but then it went right to the Disney Movie Club. And that's, yeah, it went right to the Disney Movie Club. And unfortunately, you know, they shut down the Disney Movie Club website, and you can no longer purchase these titles. The only thing that they have remotely done with Disney Movie Club exclusives is they've done like some of the animated features, putting them into Walmart with the exclusive slipcovers. But that's why I'm kind of I was kind of disappointed when Disney decided to do this. As a matter of fact, Disney had, this past spring they announced that they are no longer manufacturing home video discs. And the rumor is that they are going through Sony Pictures to distribute their titles. But I do know that if you have Disney Plus, you can at least watch it. But other than that, if you're looking for a physical media copy, good luck trying to find it. And this was a step upgrade for me when I was with the Disney Movie Club, because I had previously owned it on DVD. And it was only in full screen. This was the only way that you were going to be able to watch the movie in widescreen. And of course, that's the way I saw it in the movie theater. I didn't realize it at the time, but that's how I watched it in the movie theater. Was in widescreen. It's not that super wide of a aspect ratio. It's the 1.85 to 1. You'll find out a lot of special effects movies at this time were shot in the 1.85 aspect ratio because it was easier to achieve the effects. So, and as a matter of fact, you watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the ratio is 1.85 to 1. But yeah, but Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, it's a classic in my heart, maybe a classic in yours as well. I do have Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. I don't think they ever released Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves to Blu-ray. I know it probably went to DVD, but again, it was probably in just a... But another bad thing is that this is a bare bones disc. There is no bonus features. I would love to seen a bonus features, a bonus feature on this, because I know it's all optical effects. There was no CGI in this movie, but I would have loved to seen, you know, how they did it. If there was any. I mean, the only thing remotely I've seen is like maybe some YouTube videos where somebody had recorded something off the Disney Channel, which they aired before the movie's premiere on the channel. But that's about it. And so, yeah, that's about it. There's nothing, not even the trailers on this. So, but you know, this was this was a big movie for Disney back in the day, and you have to know what was going on with the company, and this was on their comeback, with a little bit of help from Steven Spielberg in 1988 with the Who Framed Roger Rabbit film. That kind of gave Disney a boost with the Walt Disney Pictures brand. Now, in terms of their Touchstone brand, they were having hit movies, but they needed a boost in the Walt Disney Pictures line with. Now, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was technically a Touchstone Pictures release, but that movie made animation big again. It really did. And of course, the Disney animators worked on that film, and it helped give them a boost and a jump start to be more creative with their storytelling. And so Honey, I Shrunk the Kids benefited from that, and it was mostly positive reviews. Siskel and Ebert, I don't think, gave it very good reviews, but sometimes it tickles me just to go back and watch some of their reviews, what they liked and what they didn't like. I mean, and the funny thing was, their show was distributed by Buena Vista Television, Walt Disney Television. And they had no problem. If they thought a Walt Disney feature movie was bad, they said so. Even on their own, they didn't like the. I know they didn't like the animated movie Hercules, or one of them didn't, and that which came out in '97, and they got into a big argument over that one, and. Well, another one was Benji the Hunted. Gene Siskel famously hated it, and Roger Ebert famously loved it. So, and they had an argument right there on television. So, that was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, so stay tuned for some more. I don't know what's coming up next. There may be another feature. There may be just more discussion. Well, I'm not going to show any more movies this weekend, but I do think it's interesting that we live in interesting times with the whole movie landscape, and we do have the streaming thing, and we do have it's becoming harder to purchase movies on physical disc. I still personally prefer DVDs, Blu-rays, the 4K Ultra HDs, just because of the bit rate behind them. And now these things do have a shelf life to them, as some people have found out that there's a thing called disc rot. All I can say about that is, it's like anything else. If you... I don't know what really causes it, to be honest with you, but a key thing is keep your players and your discs clean. Simple as that. I mean, that's why even if you have vinyl records, you do periodically you do want to clean them, or even a CD, you want to clean them. I mean, they do get dirty and things like that. And you can just use some regular CD cleaner, or something like that on DVDs, because it's the same setup. Now, what I'm saying is that it's harder to actually purchase physical discs anymore. Like the retail stores are... Walmart is the only one that's really been a champion of still putting out new releases. But if you go there, it's just... the new releases and everything else is just stuff that they've had out for, I'm gonna say, for the past 6 months. And then after that, it's pulled off. And matter of fact, they're making more room for collectibles, like movie collectibles and stuff like that. Target has done that for a few years, but it seems like because I still see some other YouTubers like Sean C. Phillips and Brendan Mitchell, Wet Movie One, aka Wet Movie One. They still go out every Tuesday for DVD shopping, and I'm looking at them, I'm like, guys, it's really a losing effort now. I mean, it's really a losing effort now. Now I still buy movies and stuff like that, but I'm finding more and more I'm going to Amazon, particularly for movies. Well, here, I'll pull one out on the Criterion Collection. I find it easier just to go through Amazon and purchase these there. I don't wait around for the Criterion title sale at Barnes and Noble, because you know the retail price for a Criterion, particularly a boutique label like Criterion, you're gonna you wait like every 6 months that Criterion does this with Barnes and Noble, and they do it 50% off Criterion title sale. Well, here's the problem. Barnes and Nobles have kind of refigured their stores, and so very few of them are even carrying movies now. I went to one time back in, I'm going to say it was back in, was it January or February of this year, and it was down in Noblesville, Indiana. This was their entire movie section. I'm not kidding. Criterion's, regular DVDs, that was it. They carried a few current titles. I forget offhand what they were, but they had like 2 or 3 Criterion titles, and that was it. Mostly what they were selling in terms of physical media was vinyl. But yeah, it's now, if you go to their website, you'll have quite the selection. But I've been finding Amazon is the better deal when you come to buying movies like from Criterion, because I'm holding up La Bamba because we showed that one last weekend. So a movie like this, it even on Amazon will run cheaper at regular price than it will Barnes and Noble. Now, when Barnes and Noble does the 50%, yes, you are going to be saving quite a bit of money. But I'm finding that Criterions on Amazon are marked down all the time, even on just Amazon. It's like just year round. You know, that particular title may be marked down because they're trying to sell it. Because if you know anything about the Criterion Collection, is that several of the movies that they have on the list are only on there for a certain point of time, and then they are pulled because maybe the distributor of that film say, well, your lease has run out or your license has run out, and then they either, the studio may do their own release of it if it is a Hollywood studio, or it gets handed off to somebody like Kino Lorber or Arrow Video or even Shout Factory. Because I've seen, and I've even seen like like Shout Factory titles, which is another boutique label. Shout Factory, if they'll have a film in release, but then they'll pull it. The rights owner will pull it, and then it gets handed off to Kino Lorber. As I've seen that happen with several MGM titles, and there were some Paramount titles. It just switched hands and went to Kino Lorber, and Kino Lorber, they do their own features or whatever. It's just that's just kind of where they're going now, and the studios are kind of backing away from discs altogether, because I don't know if you noticed that Universal and Warner Brothers are in partnership in distributing the discs. It's Universal that's actually doing the distribution to both Warner Brothers and Universal titles. They call it SDS. Let me see if, because I got, yeah. This is the Many States of Newark. I haven't watched it yet. I've heard terrible things, but anyway, if we look right there in the corner, SDS, Studio Distribution Services. And I think there's also a little bit of Walmart partnered in with that. But as far as I know, Paramount is still distributing their own discs. Disney just signed an agreement not too long ago with Sony, so Sony and Disney are going to be partnering for the remainder of their home video distribution. What we're kind of seeing here is a little bit of the reverse of what happened when home video started, because now the majority of these Hollywood studios, they have their streaming services. You know, Disney has Disney Plus, Warner Brothers has Max, Universal has Peacock, and I just seen this, and I just seen this, and it's a legitimate thing that Warner Brothers and Disney are bundling their packages together, so it's one bill that you pay where you get Disney and Hulu and Max all together. It sounds a little strange to me, but that's what some of them are doing with that's with streaming. But back what I was saying is that it's kind of going in reverse of what happened when home video first launched. Because when home video first came about, you know, the movie studios did not have any way to distribute the videotapes to the market. So they would, so these home video distributors, these companies, would get the license from the studio who owned the film. There was a handful of them. There was a company called Vestron Video. They were really popular in the 80s. They would get a hold of several studio titles. Vidmark Entertainment. Then there was Magnetic Video, and so all of these home video distributors they came about, and they were electronics manufacturers. They were the ones that figured it out. Hey, we could license the films from the studios put out their movies onto tape, and we will and we can make a lot of money by putting those movies out onto videotape. And then there was, of course, Laserdisc. They were doing the Laserdisc too. But then when the 80s started to roll on, the studios got smart. Now, people like Universal at the time, Universal was owned by a company called MCA, so they already had their foot in electronics manufacturing, you know, with manufacturing music, so they would get a hold of videos. And so they were already putting out Universal's titles out onto video and Laserdisc. Along with that, they were picking up a lot of other people's they were picking out some other people's films as well. One of them was Disney. Disney would put out, now Disney at first did not put out any home video features. They would not put out any of their full-length features out onto video, but instead they would license to MCA, you know, Mickey Mouse cartoon collection or a Donald Duck cartoon collection. And so that's what would happen. And this was like in the early days. But like I said, the studios got smart. They did one of a couple things. They either set up their own video distribution company, or they bought one. In the case of 20th Century Fox, 20th Century Fox partnered with CBS Broadcasting, and they also got MGM involved, and they had purchased this company called Magnetic Video. And then it changed to CBS Fox Video. Or if MGM wanted to do a home video release, again, it would partner with the same company. It was CBS. It became MGM CBS Video. And then it just finally became CBS Fox Video, and they would handle MGM's titles until MGM got established with their home video line. And then eventually Walt Disney came out with their home video line, and that was under careful consideration, and that wasn't until the mid-80s when they did that. It was around the mid-80s when they did that, and it took some very, very careful consideration, because Disney was one of those people that thought, and they still to this day think their stuff smells sweeter than everybody else's, and that's why when you go to buy a Disney Blu-ray, you're not going to get it discounted, or you cannot do like on Fandango at home, do the disc to digital program. Disney titles are not qualifying. You have to pay full price. They want you to, because they think their stuff smells sweeter than everybody else's, and so, and then yeah, that's what happened, is that eventually the studios, they stopped licensing out their movies to the home video distributors. Instead, what they did was they either bought companies or they set up their own companies. In cases like companies like Vidmark Entertainment and Vestron, they decided, because they were not getting the studio product, they decided, well, hey, why don't we go into the theatrical film market and produce some lower budget films and try to, produce product that's going to compete with the studios. Well, it worked for a little while. It worked for a little while, and then the product became worse and worse and worse and worse, and to the point where they said, we give up. And now Lionsgate owns both of those names. They both own Vestron and Vidmark, aka Trimark. That's why Vidmark Entertainment was the home video division, and they produced their motion picture line, Trimark. Trimark Pictures. So, but then Lionsgate came in and bought both of those companies, bought both Vestron and Trimark, and they also, well, Vestron also became Artisan. They became Artisan Entertainment, and they were really big around the early 2000s, around 99, 2000, with a little film called The Blair Witch Project, and that they made a fortune on that, but it wasn't enough. But again, the product there afterward was not very successful, and so they ended up getting acquired by Lionsgate. So that's why when you look at all those films that like Vestron, actually Lionsgate did a whole video series called the Vestron Collection, which they put out the entire Vestron home video library onto Blu-ray and DVD under Lionsgate. But yeah, but what we're seeing into this day is kind of the reverse, is that now the studios are partnering back up with other studios to do home video distribution. And I'll let you in on a little something, it's not going to last long. I'm just giving you a heads up, because yeah, they're partnering with other studios, but that's not going to last long. And I'll tell you why. Because studios don't really like to partner with each other. They don't, nor do they like to lease something, or they don't really like to borrow something that a competing studio owns. See, now I'll try to give you an example. In the 1950s, there was the invention of widescreen presentation, okay, which we are all used to now when we go to the movies, or even when we watch our movies on our TV. We're used to a widescreen presentation, okay. Now, back in the day when those were invented, the studios owned those cameras, they owned those formats. 20th Century Fox owned CinemaScope. Paramount Pictures owned VistaVision. There was the company Todd AO, which was a 70 millimeter format, and they produced their own films for a while, and then they got the studios involved with that. MGM owned MGM Camera 65, which later became known as Ultra Panavision 70. But yeah, but the deal there was especially with CinemaScope, MGM and Warner Brothers and Disney and several other people, they said, well, hey, we really want to shoot a movie in the CinemaScope process. We want to shoot that in CinemaScope. Well, you got to go through the legal department at 20th Century Fox to do that. So that's what they did. And for 13 years, the name CinemaScope did grace the screens. But it was mostly 20th Century Fox that was using the name. But see, even Warner Brothers would go to CinemaScope for a feature, or they went to Vista, like The Searchers, John Ford's The Searchers, starring John Wayne. It was shot in VistaVision. So Warner Brothers had to go to the legal department of Paramount to get the cameras and the film stock and to shoot the Searchers in VistaVision. So yeah, and the studios were kind of like, you know what? We need to come up with the technology that can do both the CinemaScope presentation and the VistaVision presentation, or VistaVision-like presentation, without going to our competitors to do so. And so it was up to Panavision to come forward with the technology and say, well, here you use these lenses for the scope, and then you use these lenses, so you use these anamorphic lenses for the CinemaScope, and then you use these spherical lenses for which we'll call flat, for the VistaVision. And so they went to an electronics maker who had nothing to do with the studio system other than just, hey, we're renting cameras off of you guys. They didn't have to go through legal departments at competing studios, because when that happens, the studio that owns that technology will say, well, we'll let you have that for this much a day. So they were seeing profit off of that. And so the same goes with home video. They'll partner up for a little bit, but then eventually what's going to happen is there's going to be no more disc manufacturing. It's all going to be streaming. And matter of fact, I think we're 90% there already. It's just us who are the disc-based people who are kind of holding them back and say, no, we still want a disc. And then also, what's turning up are the boutique labels like Criterion, Kino Lorber, Shout Factory, Arrow Video. All of these people are turning up. Even Mill Creek Entertainment is turning up to release studios' product onto Blu-ray and DVD, and even the 4K Ultra HD. So that concludes this weekend at the movies. So come back next time. We'll have some more movies, possibly some more discussion. So, from me to you, see you later.